This is the second of the dialogues in this series. Yes, I would just like to say a few words about Yinka and Elsie. So Yinka was a Turner Prize nominee in 2004. He was appointed MBE. One of his most recognizable works was the Nelson ship in a bottle that was a Fourth Plinth Commission in Trafalgar Square in 2012. His work is included in prominent collections internationally, including Tate collection, Victoria and Albert Museum, National Museum of African Art in the Smithsonian in Washington, and many others. Now, his collaborator, Elsie, is principal and founder of her own firm, Elsie Owusu Architects. She's a specialist conservation architect. Her projects include UK Supreme Court, London's Green Park Station, and various other transport projects in Ghana and Nigeria. Elsie was previously a member of Arts Council England and the National Trust of England. Elsie is currently serving on our own AA Board of Directors and also UK Supreme Court Arts Trust, as well as the Royal Arabia Council. She's also Vice Chair of London School of Architecture. And we will perhaps, maybe, Yinka, we will take a moment to look back at your work and a kind of symbolism, perhaps, of this most recognizable of your works. And it will probably, in a way, come back to us in the project that you're realizing in Lagos. Yeah. But maybe we can start talking about the kind of symbolism in relationship maybe to your career and your kind of development as an artist.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think I'll start by just talking about where the work has actually come from and context, and also the contemporary art world and the issues that a lot of contemporary artists, are concerned with, and how those issues kind of informed my own work. So I'd start from the political perspective and identity politics. So I started working in the 80s. And when I was at art school in the 80s, after the Vietnam War in the United States, we're talking 69, the post-Vietnam War, the feminist movement, was very strong. And then the civil rights movement, and then post-colonial writing and post-colonial activism was also very strong. A lot of African artists were African countries. Some of them became independent in the 50s and also in the 60s. A lot of people like myself, I'm from Nigeria. I grew up here. I was born here. I grew up in Nigeria and also in the UK. A lot of us going to art school looked around us and we saw a lot of, when you went to the Tate or you went to various museums, you saw a lot of sort of white male art, a lot of the sort of, abstract expressionism, pop art, and a lot of us was kind of looking at the particularly artists of African origin, looking at also the feminist movement and also wanting to, acknowledge our own visibility, our own identities in our own practice. In London, there's a very well-known magazine called Thought Text, which is a magazine which features a lot of work of artists from a lot of the post-colonial countries. So when I was at art school, there were people like, Cindy Sherman, Barbara Kruger, photography, and also a lot of political art coming out of the United States. Artists, African-American artists, like David Hammons. There was a show at the Tate Gallery called Soul of a Nation, which is a work by a lot of African-American artists. Now, when I was at art school, I wasn't taught any of that. I knew Warhol, I knew all the other, and then I had a kind of traditional art training. I went to a college called Byam School of Art to begin with, and I was actually doing live drawing. And this was kind of in my early years at art school. And so...
And you returned from Nigeria to study here?
Yes.
And presumably during that time, there was something that, there was a kind of cultural influence that you were exposed to while being in Nigeria, rather than just living in London for the whole of your...
Well, yes, but the point I was going to make there was that I was, painting from the figure. Mm-hmm. And I was also, at the same time, becoming kind of politically aware and politically conscious. So I wondered why, I was doing this work that had nothing to do with me or my background or whatever, drawing the nude and all that. I mean, technically, it was okay, but anyway, I then started making work about what was going on in Russia, perestroika at the time, because Russia was, changing, Soviet Union was breaking up and all that. So I was kind of looking at myself in the context of global politics. And one of my tutors said to me, well, you're of African origin, aren't you? Why aren't you producing authentic African art? And then, of course, I started to question this idea of, what is authentic English art? Is it Morris dancing? Is it, what's that about? So I went to Brixton Market, and there are lots of, they sell batik in Brixton Market, and I started talking to them about the batik, and I was told, because I always imagined that the batik, I thought they were kind of, original, authentic African textiles. And then I was told, they're Indonesian-influenced fabrics produced by the Dutch, and then sold in West Africa. And the fabrics are also made in West Africa now, made in China. But the origins are kind of in Indonesia. But I thought the fabrics formed a very kind of interesting metaphor for contemporary kind of hybrid identities. People come from somewhere, they move to another place, and there's so many of us kind of with those kinds of identities now. And so I decided then that my work would be about that. It would be, and then of course, I'm kind of politically interested, and visibility in your work is also very, very interesting. So that's kind of where the work started.
Mm-hmm. So we'll have a look at some more of your work. So
this is a piece that was in Trafalgar Square, Nelson's Ship in a Bottle. I was invited to put something on the Fourth Plinth, and Nelson's column is in Trafalgar Square, and Nelson won the Battle of Trafalgar against Napoleon. I'd probably be speaking French to you now if it lost. And, and then the seas kind of opened to the British Empire, and so indirectly, Nelson kind of, probably responsible for me speaking English to you now, partly. And HMS, Nelson won the battle in the ship called HMS Victory. And so I changed the sails on that ship into the textiles, so it's very colorful. And you can see this piece at the Maritime Museum in Greenwich, because it's permanently installed outside, after I did that project. But I've gone on to do, to parody Victorian costumes and, in the work. And I've done, the work is evolved into various. So this piece...
Maybe before we go to that, maybe something.
Yeah, so I moved into doing public sculpture. And so this is called wind sculpture, and wind sculpture evolved out of doing sails on the boat in Trafalgar Square. But this is fiberglass made to look soft. It's painted fiberglass. And this piece here is at Harwick Place near Victoria Station. So that's a permanent installation. And I will be installing one of the wind sculptures in Central Park in March in New York. So I've got a much bigger, the next series is much bigger. So one of them will be installed there, just temporary exhibition for about 6 months.
they still project the kind of vivid colors that one could associate with Africa in a way, but not.
Well, I mean, that's kind of, well, that's every cultural idea is a fabrication.
Yeah.
So, you know, if the work says Africa to people, that's because those colors have been adopted in Africa. But I don't think that they're particularly unique in that sense to Africa. You know, anyone can adopt any kind of, you know.
But was your Russian work so colourful?
No, not particularly. It was quite dark, if I can remember. Right. But you know, and lots of text and so on. You know, but then the question about authenticity kind of pushed me into actually, and also this, I didn't talk about theory. Of course, I studied at Goldsmiths College after Byam School, and at the time, you know, we were actually looking at semiotics, and we were studying, you know, representation and where things would come from, you know. And I was reading, you know, Roland Barthes mythologies. And so the politics of representation was actually fundamental. And the things that you kind of assume, and of course, you know, culture is kind of constructed anyway. And so stereotypes are constructed. Prejudice comes from that, you know, it comes from the kind of false constructs. And so it's kind of deconstructing things. So I came, you know, so my career kind of evolved out of the sort of postmodern era, really. Yeah. So.
And then it becomes figurative.
Yes, so that's kind of figurative. That's the thing I did, a commission for Yale. And that piece was shown at Kensington Palace as well, fairly recently. And then I've been looking at lots of kind of, you know, classical sculptures, because I discovered that the white marble classical sculpture was a sort of myth. The sculptures were painted originally, and there was a German critic called Winkelmann who he created this myth of the white marble, and then Adolf Hitler also adopted this white kind of Roman sculptures as the ideal image for the Aryan race. And so I've been sort of deconstructing them.
But now you do have certain references to the artwork that already exists. What is a kind of drive to refer to art that it's already been produced?
Well, yes, I mean, the main reason for doing that is it's very important to kind of, I'd like to work with things that people already know, because I feel that I can engage them more. And also, within art itself, art has there's been a long conversation about the question of originality and also appropriation, and the kind of, you know, can we actually make anything new anymore? And then if we're not making anything new, can we work with what's already there? You know, so, but those are kind of debates within the art world. I don't know if within architecture either issues about appropriation come up or not.
Probably does.
Yeah, you know, so that's kind of where that comes from.
And then you mentioned earlier the kind of problems of the contemporary art practice, and we can probably all translate it to the problems of contemporary architecture. But I mean, one of the reasons why you are here is to kind of question the problems of architecture in the way it's practiced. But is it space? Is space problem?
Well, no, you see, the issue. So I've been working with commercial galleries now for maybe at least, I've been with my gallery now for about 23, 24 years. About 10 years ago, I bought a building in the East End, which is near Broadway Market. And I wanted to have an experimental space, a space where artists can fail, a space where artists are free to fail. They've got a space that, you see, within the commercial art world, there's a lot of pressure on artists to produce things to sell all the time. But I think that's not necessarily good art. It's not good for practice. You know, you can, but you can't fail. So, and then in London, because of the price of real estate, you know, it's very difficult for a lot of younger artists to find space to experiment. I mean, when I was a student and I first came out of college, you know, I worked in a squat for a long time because this was in the 80s in London. You could just find abandoned buildings and do stuff. And I realized the younger generation were not getting this. So I converted the ground floor of my studio into a gallery. And it's a project space and I call it guest projects. I put a kitchen in there as well, where, you know, people can sort of, you know, people can cook. We have lots of dinners there. And I've probably worked with over, you know, at least 150 artists or more. And the way it works is that there's a proposal box outside the space, and you put your proposal in there, then you can get a residency for a month. The artists who showed there previously select the next group of artists. And it's all art forms, you know, from performance to dance to theater, visual arts. And so, and I've been doing that now for about 10 years, so it will be 10 years. And the great thing about this is the artists have to apply, they have to get their own funding to make their shows. But then if they sell work, we don't take any profit, we don't take anything. They just get a contract saying, you know, they will leave the space the way they found it. And they've got keys to the space and they can be there. And some artists choose to actually, because you don't necessarily have to show, you can work in the space. Yeah. Some artists choose to make work there and then show something at the end. And they've got 24-hour access to the space. You know, we just give them the keys and say, okay, it's yours for a month.
And what you're saying is that that's very different to what's the kind of typical residency program that exists for artists.
Well, I mean, I think because it's not one where you kind of stay there. But then I've had applications from different parts of the world, and people come to London and they, you know, make their own arrangements. And the other thing I do is, it shouldn't be a solo exhibition, it has to be a group show. But we do everything from music to, and also if different art forms also collaborate as well to create something. And I feel that in the contemporary art world at the moment, it's a sort of experimental thing that's missing in a way, because there's just, you know, financial pressures living in London, and people have to do something that sells. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, my work is very commercial, but I still want to have that space too.
For experimentation.
Yeah.
So this is some more of the work.
Some of the projects that people are doing.
And then food seems to be quite important.
Yes, food is important, art and food. We do something called the Artist Dining Room. So every 3 months, we do a supper based on an artist. So we've done suppers based on Louis Bourgeois, Andy Warhol, you know, different artists. And a chef cooks a meal based on the life and the history of an artist. And somebody does a presentation about the work of the artist. And we usually have up to about 60 people.
And is that a network that you've created over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing the suppers now for at least, I would say, I don't know, at least 7 years or so. Yeah. And then the money that we get, obviously people pay to come for the suppers, and the money goes back into into the space.
So is it organized as a charity, a foundation?
No, I mean, I chose not to register as a charity, and I didn't want a board that will kind of control what we could do. I wanted freedom, so I thought actually, no, it'll just be, it'll just be part of the business, the studio business, in the sense that, I don't accept money from people, so they have to actually bring their own fund into the space. And because I don't really manage money, I don't manage anybody else's money, I just give the artist space. So it's but it makes me very flexible and nimble. I don't have to ask a board anything. And also, if I want to be spontaneous in the program, I can actually do that. So, if I suddenly meet somebody really interesting and I want to do a project with them next month.
There's no process.
Yeah, I can do that. I've got the freedom. If I have a board, I have to go and ask them if, So I don't, yeah.
I mean, I think that's quite interesting as a way of working, something that's been set up without a structure.
Yeah. I mean, there's this sort of infrastructure, which my art provides the infrastructure. And then within that infrastructure, artists are free to kind of, to do stuff. But it's not anarchy because, we do have a contract.
Yeah.
And you know what the rules are. You can't disturb the neighbors or, you have to be kind of careful. But, yeah, apart from doing the kind of, behaving normally.
Yeah.
Although that's a contradiction when you're talking about artists, but, yeah.
Now, it's interesting that this idea has sort of been then taken out of this context, and you're sort of looking back at Lagos and Nigeria. I mean, is this a return home, or what's the...
Well, I mean, I have family in Nigeria, and I grew up partly in Nigeria, and the art scene in Lagos is actually growing. I mean, they have their first art fair. Many spaces are kind of opening, private spaces are opening, and so I have the idea to do guest projects in Lagos, because I call the London one guest projects. And so I approached Elsie to help with designing the space for Lagos. The difference between the Lagos and the London space is that I will have a studio there. And it's like a home with a gallery. And there will be rooms for people to stay in. And people will come from all over the world to use it. And the idea is they will do a residency for, about, from between 6 weeks to about 3 months, depending on the person. And there are 3 rooms there where people can stay. And there's a small gallery that can work, but the idea is to also collaborate with local institutions as well, so that there'll be excursions to local galleries, local institutions, and then people can work. And I don't know if Elsie wants to say anything about...
Well, I guess we'll probably start with a kind of idea of collaboration.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting, and it's funny you should say that, because one of the things that I'm really interested in, and picking up from your theme of layered identities, is the nature of 21st century practice. And I think the idea of people gathering together in a space, coming there at a time every day, and being the same people being together, the idea of an office as the basis of practice, I think is probably had its day. Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's had its day. And this slide is really talking about the collaborations that what my practice is, in effect, which is in the same way as you're talking about the batik coming from Indonesia and Holland and West Africa and now China. That's kind of how this project, after you approached me, the project started to work. So my practice is in London, in Ghana. We have a collaboration with the executive architects in Nigeria, and also in Albania. So working with our collaborators in Albania. So there have been maybe with engineers and sustainability and your team, maybe 30 odd people working on the project. And traditionally, if you had 30 people working on a project, you'd expect them to be in the same place. But with communication, I can get drawings to Nigeria on WhatsApp or email faster than I can bike them across London. So that collaboration is much, much faster, much more efficient. And actually, if you're like me and you don't like HR, you don't have to deal with kind of water cooler and HR issues, you know, and you don't have to see people you don't like, which I think is a huge plus. So to my way of thinking, the Commonwealth and you know the common past that we've had, some of it unhappy, is actually potentially a catalyst for a great collaboration and a much happier future. So just going to Yinka's project. Perhaps you just say a bit more about your vision for the project, because you have a big vision. It's a small site with a big vision and huge potential, in my view.
Well, I mean, I think that, what I'm trying to do really is to, you know, there are lots of young people, young artists in Nigeria who, because I went to a talk in Nigeria, British Council took me to Nigeria in November to do a talk there. And there's a lot of enthusiasm. And I can tell that there's a kind of hunger for sort of international collaboration. People want to have access. Unfortunately, there are not many institutions in like a contemporary art museum yet. And I did this process actually started by commissioning a report on what's available on the ground. So somebody wrote a report about the various museums and the various arts institutions. And then I thought that going straight to trying to build a contemporary art museum and raise money for that would be like kind of parachuting something alien into a space. That it's actually better to start small, to start with being on the ground, and to start with something that comes from the artist. So a space where local people can actually interact directly with other artists from elsewhere. So that the whole thing, I still think my end game or my vision would be at some point there would be a proper institution, because there are actually lots of collectors in Nigeria as well. And if those people pass away, I mean, who's going to look after all the works and look after the heritage and so on? So those institutions are quite important. And but starting organically with a platform, you know, as I've managed to do in London for 10 years. And I thought if I could take the same model over there, and then artists can sort of, interact and develop work. And also, as we know, again, that's because of the kind of colonial relationship with Africa. The traffic is hugely to the west, but the traffic is not necessarily from the west over there. There are a lot of people over here who are really ignorant of Africa. I mean, they have no idea, because they just go on the stereotypes that they see on TV or whatever. And actually, there are very exciting things happening there. You know, a younger generation, and the possibility to do things are still huge, because, you know, it's developing. And so, and there's some kind of excitement really that's going on there now. And so I thought, you know, a cultural exchange program like this will actually benefit everybody, and that's kind of where the thoughts kind of began for this, really.
So the site itself is in an area of Lagos called Lekki, which is growing very, very fast. Even though you can't see the sea from Yinka's site, it's actually very close to the sea. So it's wedged between an expressway on one end and the sea on the other. And I'm still convinced that from the roof you will get a fantastic view of the sea. So this is one of the great things about architecture, is actually, you have an idea and the drawings, and you make models, but when you're actually in the building, there are just so many things that happen that you had absolutely no conception of. So one of these things I'm convinced is going to be closeness to the sea. So it's a small site, as I say, it's a small site with big ambitions. One of the great things about, one of the first things that I was told when I started at the AA is never work with a client you don't like. So, and that was Mark Fisher said that. And
you're mentioning Mark Fisher the second time he was mentioned last time.
Well, he was a great mentor. Anyway, so that's one of the first things that he said to me, and it was a great lesson. So in Yinka, I found a client that I do like, and it's just wonderful working with clients that you
that's good.
that you really like, who actually inspires the architecture. So this house is really about Yinka and about his vision and how he wants to live, and the ideas that he has for art and architecture. And one of the best things is that you said from the very beginning was that he didn't want a rich man's mansion, and if you look at these slides, you see exactly, I mean, it's just great to be, as good to be told what somebody doesn't want as to be told what they do want. So the picture on the top right-hand side, as I look at it, is an example of one of the houses that Yinka doesn't want, which is a great thing. So, and also you can see how the coastline, which isn't in a good state, but, because the sanitation isn't what it ought to be in a country as wealthy as Lagos, but we have great hopes. So the inspirations, I have a great love for modernist architecture. And somebody said, well, it's not modern architecture anymore because, it's actually 19th century, early 20th century architecture, but modernist architecture. And making wheelchair access, celebrating the ramp and your use of the ramp. I mean, it's great to have a lift, but, when you have electricity, which is on and off, an intermittent supply, actually starting from that point, starting from complete accessibility and freedom from barriers in that house is a very, very important thing. And so that becomes almost like a totem, the fundamental idea of movement around the house. And looking at examples like the Villa Savoie was a great inspiration. And so then thinking about combining the ramp and movement around the house with Yinka's love of books, and the idea for a ramp which could also be a library. So the library and the ramp became combined as a sort of route for the house. And so the house, as you'll see later on, is actually wrapped round with a ramp, or the ramp wraps round the studios and the living area. So I like to work in sections. So we started off by working in section, because I tend to find that if the section works, then the plan will work. Whereas, and if the section is elegant, then you tend to get an elegant plan. And so, dropping another name, this was one of Nigel Coates, one of the things I learned from Nigel Coates. So just looking at the section and how the ramp works, and the ramp has to be slow and elegant and useful, purposeful. So we, with the collaborators in Albania, it took absolutely ages to work out the ramp, how the ramp works, how it wraps around the house. and also a small pool, which was part of the brief. And actually, we didn't know the size of the site initially. We didn't have a site plan. Mm-hmm. We kind of knew-ish. But it just, the building just kept getting tighter and tighter and tighter and going up and up and up. So it was very useful to have a section. And then also having a means of locating the pool. Sustainability was very important, wasn't it, to you, Yinka?
Yes, yes.
This was, do you want to say a bit about that?
Well, I mean, obviously, you know, I wanted a building that wouldn't waste energy, and a sustainable building. And you know, it's very hot in Lagos as well. And, you know, people have glass boxes and they have air conditioning in those black boxes, in those glass boxes. But I didn't want to live in anything like that. You know, I wanted a building that will work with the environment. And, you know, I mean, I asked Elsie if Elsie could figure out a way of doing that. And then you're working with, is it XCO2?
XCO2. And they're sustainability engineers, so they create models of the building and they look at how the air circulates. So we wanted as much natural cooling as possible.
Yes.
And solar power, minimum use of energy and sustainable energy. I mean, it's partly practical because the electricity supply is not reliable, and using generators is expensive. But the principle is that you were interested in sustainability. So just looking at, this is one of the original models, and your interest in MK27.
Yes.
Studio MK27 as an inspiration. So part of it is, the focus of the house is the courtyard. And that's something which is very important in African architecture, is the use of the courtyard.
Yeah. And do you remember that we talked earlier, very earlier on, years ago, about the Yoruba architecture? Yeah. The African buildings, you know, traditional African architecture, which was the starting point.
And similarly in Ghana, that life is lived outside. So the courtyard becomes an entry point, but it's also a socializing space and a performing space and a place where people gather and live. So this is one of very, very early diagrams, and actually the design hasn't changed that much. The main entrance, and the main entrance has to be accessible to big vehicles because some of the work that's coming in might be big fat work. So that's how the plans ended up. So the courtyard, which is the performance space and the entry point. And also, there's the gallery space, which we call the Great Room, and two smaller studio spaces. Yes. And then an attendance space. And downstairs, as you have at guest projects, is a general kitchen for artists and for guests, and for the attendants as well. So, and just the fascination with some of the work that you've done and the connection with gathering around food and conversations around food, and so that the people who come to stay are part of the family but also have their own privacy. So this work, Yinka, is this one.
Oh, that's Scramble for Africa.
Scramble for Africa. Yes. Which is great because it has the political context, but it's also talking about the gathering together. Well,
actually, no, it's actually, it's not something you would like a lot.
It looks great.
You wouldn't like it very much. Okay. There was a conference in Berlin where all the European countries came together to divide Africa up into different countries, and they didn't bother to ask the Africans if they wanted to be in those countries or not. And so this is a kind of a parody of that meeting they had around the table. So it was 14 European countries. And so on this installation, there's a map of Africa on that table. And because actually, you know, there are lots of people in Nigeria that I can't actually communicate with because we are from different regions, but the British drew a line in the sand and said, there you go, that's Nigeria. You guys are all, you belong to the same country now. You know, so this is the kind of residue of kind of colonial power. Yeah.
But it's interesting because the same thing happened in Ghana. So people live between Ghana and Togo. But the wonderful thing is that they vote in both countries. So it is, and so we have Technica as our engineers. We have engineers in Nigeria and engineers in the UK. Mm-hmm. So the Nigerian engineers are collaborating with the UK engineers. Because obviously trial holes and making sure that the conditions are right, and also building regs in Nigeria, it wouldn't make sense to do it from here. And of course they're much more skilled than we are in understanding those conditions. And so these are the dynamic models, just running through. And a major part of the house is the screen, which shelters the living areas. And is based on a lovely piece which Yinka did, which I have See, I do like the Scramble for Africa. I'm convinced that these people are having fun. So.
Well, they are having fun subdividing Africa.
Yes, that's right. Well, we could reappropriate it. So this is the screen. Do you just want to say a bit about that piece of work? Because it's a big piece, isn't it?
Yes, this is a wall mural I did for a show at Stephen Friedman Gallery, which is called And the Wall Fell Away. But they're interlocking circles. And actually, funny enough, when this piece was being thought about and made, because I was putting the art directly on the wall, but I was trying to make something really quite beautiful and with interlocking circles. That coincided with a time when, you know, everyone was talking about building walls and Donald Trump was doing his wall building and everybody else, you know. And I wanted to create sort of an interlocking circles, a more inclusive, beautiful wall. You know, that's kind of where that evolved, yeah.
Yes, so this is our very own.
So did the choice of the pattern come from Yinka or from you?
No, from me. I designed. Okay. Yeah, I designed that.
So Yinka designed it, but we needed something. We had the idea of the screen.
Yes.
But so we took the idea of the screen, and I mean this is how the project has worked. It's been collaborative in that sense.
Yeah.
So now what we're trying to do is to engineer this huge piece, which is like a piece of work that Yinka's done. I don't know if you've done anything as big as this screen.
No, I don't think so. No.
But actually engineering it in London and Lagos is pretty complicated.
And where is it going to be manufactured?
It's going to be locally manufactured. And of course it also has to be a security screen because it has to prevent people getting into the building. It has to shade the building. It has to be a security screen, and it's also a big artwork. So that's it, and it's work in progress. But we have planning consent.
So you do have planning consent.
We have planning consent now, which is a great thing, but it's also quite limiting because in Lagos they do planning consent and building regulations all in one. So if you want to start pushing and pulling the building about, if you want to start going into design, detailed design, you have to skirt very carefully around the planning consent that you've already been given. So it's a challenge.
So the kind of, maybe sort of just thinking back about the collaborative nature of, not just this project, but art in general. Is that something that we are sort of going towards?
I mean, what do you mean in that?
Well, I mean, generally as a way of, because this is a piece of architecture, so in a way it's quite obvious the kind of, in some ways it's quite obvious where the collaboration is. But in art, for example, there is still a level of collaboration that exists. I mean, your art is sometimes difficult to, it's sometimes very difficult to understand how it's been made.
I mean, I think, well, art has always had, the nature of art has always been collaborative, for thousands and thousands of years. I mean, I've had this idea of the genius artist who just makes everything themselves is a very modern phenomenon. I mean, a lot of artists have always had studios, and, a lot of the artists you see in the National Gallery or whatever, Rembrandt or all this, I mean, other people paint the clothes and the artist just sometimes just paints the face. Mm-hmm. And that's it. The master will come, just do the face, and then the studio people will paint the costumes or whatever. So, I mean, it's always been, kind of like that anyway. And I think we've sort of returned to, I mean, contemporary art is very multidisciplinary. I mean, I wouldn't, you do need to work with a lot of people, all different skills. I mean, I do projects where up to about 40 different people are involved in the actual process before you get the final. Because, you can't necessarily go and learn about every single type of thing, learn about plastics, learn about photography, learn about, take you hundreds of years, so you have to collaborate.
And interestingly, when I was working on the Supreme Court, I was working with a team of about 12 artists, and I had the fond hope that, when Yinka was doing this beautiful commission called The Tree, and this was supposed to be 14 meters, I think, and when he first started talking about the tree, I had this sort of fond image of Yinka sitting there with a pair of scissors cutting out all the beautiful little African leaves, And I actually discovered, which is wonderful, that there are these factories, art factories. There's a huge one in Elephant and Castle. Mm-hmm. And, you walk in and they're making Yinka's work, and they're making Tracy Emin's work, and they're making the Chapman brothers' work, and they're a factory. So, they get a drawing, and then they do detailed design, and then they go back. So it's an architectural type of process. So, but it's actually very few people know about it. And it's like an aircraft hangar, and there are just hundreds of people working.
Well, and also I think just practically, I mean, as an artist, as a studio, your studio may be doing, 100 shows a year or whatever. You're not going to be making 100 shows by yourself. It's not possible. So you have to,
you have to collaborate.
Yeah, you have to collaborate.
I think this is very great to hear, because one of the points of this series is to kind of break illusions about both architecture but also other fields.
Yeah. I think it would be really interesting to have the head of one of those big studios come and talk about the range of artists' work that they do, because they have their own sort of portfolio of artists, and the most important ones have the very great artists working for them, people like Yinka and people like the Dean of the Chapman brothers. And it's part of London, but it's a sort of concealed part of London. Yeah. It's very interesting.
I guess one question before we sort of open up to the audience would be, so going back to Yinka's entrance into this building, which took about 15 minutes to get a big sheet of plywood from the wood and metal workshop to get Yinka in, and obviously the importance of ramp in this project. I mean, your perception of the world and architecture has very much come from, the wheelchair and the kind of certain limitations, but potentially some possibilities that we're not able to.
Well, realize. I mean, I think as somebody who is a wheelchair user, first of all, we need to get away from this idea that the idea of limitations, or that the world even exists. I mean, limitation is like a mirage. It doesn't actually exist. It's something that you make. And so a lot of artists, politically with disability, actually in that world, it's the environment that actually disables you, not the person. So there is no such thing as a disabled person. I mean, there is the disabling environment, but there's not a disabled person. So in a world where if buildings were accessible, then actually people would have, would be able to have the same equal attainment and equal opportunities, but if you put barriers in people's way and architects are not aware of the buildings that they're building, then obviously they will then be creating the disability. Mm-hmm. So not, the person is not actually intrinsically disabled. It's the environment that disables the person.
Mm. It's a great thing to think about.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Any questions for Yinka? We'll have microphones, but we don't necessarily need them.
I'm just curious. Is it working? Yeah. Okay. Why is the swimming pool on the first floor?
Because it's linked to Yinka's own space, Yinka's own private space,
okay.
which is at the top. Because that's where, I think it gets increasingly more private as you go up the building through the section, and his own personal space is right up at the top.
Okay.
And the swimming pool is accessible. So is there a ramp going to a swimming pool?
Well, the ramp goes right round, and then it's completely level when you get up to the top.
Okay.
Hi, I've got a question as well. Yinka, you talked about the fact that the basement of your studio in London is sort of used as an art space for collaborative work, artists coming together. And I just wonder, obviously, I think about that space as a flexible, open space.
Yes.
How does that concept and that idea of the art space translate into the project in Lagos? And Elsie, how do you see artists using, this space in terms of coming together and the production of art and the whole process of it?
Yeah. Well, at the bottom, we didn't really explore that area of the building downstairs where the galleries are. So there's a gallery downstairs.
Okay.
And so things will happen. So it's a space, it's a flexible space that can open up into one big space. But it's also, it can be used as 3 studios. There's one larger space and then 2 smaller studios. And then that can also be converted into a whole big gallery because the doors are flexible, they can be pushed back.
Like concertina doors.
Yeah, so they can become one big space. And the idea is that the artists who come there to do residencies, because they will have rooms up there, but while they're there, they'll make work. I mean, the other thing, which is a new part of the project. I'm actually I've acquired land, about 15 acres of land, just one outside Lagos, to do a farm. And then there'll be an ecology gallery. So the people who come to do residencies can also, if they want to go away to a quiet place, they can also go to the countryside and stay there for a bit. But they'll then be bringing their various experiences, hopefully doing some work in the gallery, in their studio spaces there. And so create work from that experience. And so the space downstairs is a space to do that.
So this is the first floor plan. So there are 3 ensuite bedrooms on the first floor, which can be used by the people who are doing residencies. And then there's a sort of guest dining room, guest kitchen. So the guests can collaborate, can socialise. And then you asked about the upper floor. So this is Yinka's rather palatial, I must say, upper floor, where there's a very big socialising space. Yinka's own studio, which looks out towards the ocean. And then, so that's the bedroom here and a second bedroom, and then this is the pool. So when you're up at the second floor, it's completely level access, and you can see the ramp sort of swinging this way swinging around the building. So the ramp is very, very long and very slow.
Yeah, but also the galleries. So the idea is that we collaborate with the local artists. You know, we'll have talks there and things like that. So we'll be having a lot of activities that can actually bring people in, so that the artists are not completely isolated. You know, they have some kind of communication with both institutions there. They'll go out to things, and they'll be taken on excursions to things as well as. So there'll be a collaboration between the outside and the inside, you know, bringing people.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, just one more question. Just thinking about the future of the gallery space and the White Cube, what are your thoughts on, you know, the future of contemporary art and the future of, you know, the gallery space, you know, from an architecture point of view?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, I mean, I've always said, to, you know, in the world of kind of, you know, multimedia, laptops and computers and all of that, I mean, I think in a way, as an artist, your space is kind of, you know, in your head, really. I mean, it's where you are. You don't, you know, obviously, to show physical things, you need, you know, space. But a lot of art also is very much about ideas. So I don't think that all artists need to actually have a physical space or a physical, and not all art takes place in the gallery. I mean, I've just made a piece which is actually at the Royal Academy at the moment, and it's a virtual reality piece. You know, I've done my first VR, and also there are already VR museums in existence. In fact, there's a museum that exists completely on VR, and you can go and look at the collection. So, and this is actually the future direction of things as well. But I think we live in a world where there will be multiple platforms in which people can engage with art and show their work. It can be in the virtual world, it can be in the real world. But I think, you know, but I certainly don't think that the physical space is dead, because it's human instinct. I mean, people still want to gather, even if they can do, you know, even if they can gather virtually or in virtual space, they will still want that contact. Because, you know, this lecture today could have been done on Skype or whatever, but I mean, people still want to, you know, to have a physical space. So I think as far as architecture is concerned, I mean, I think that probably will still carry on. They need to be in a physical space, and sometimes some artworks, you actually have to be in front of them and see them and you know, experience the work. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi. I just want to ask a question about the site. So why, if there's a reason why you chose that specific site in Lekki and maybe instead of a site in Ikeja or on the mainland, if there was a reason behind that?
Well, it's about audiences, and also there's also a degree of security as well involved in that. For those of you who don't know Lagos, well, I mean, that area is called Lekki, and it's on the island. It's where a lot of the kind of, I guess you would say, middle-class people live, and it's well, quote-unquote, safer. It's safer, I think. And they've got better infrastructure. You know, the drainage is there, the roads are there. So it's just easier from that point of view. And also audiences, I mean, the people who might want to come to the gallery or come to the house, most of them will be fairly nearby, but not necessarily. But then, you know, I'm creating a farm in the countryside as well, which is 1 hour from Lagos, that people can actually go to as well. So, and it's a balance between the kind of the rural and the kind of urban in that way. Yeah.
I mean, I had a question. I thought the question about space and gallery was quite interesting. And when you see the amount of space that's being created for art, the new modern, you know, really anywhere you look, you can see a vast amount of space being created to house art. What's your, I mean, you know, what's your thought about that? the scale, maybe, or what's needed?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, art is also going through what I might describe as the kind of Disneyfication of art. It's a sort of, big, spectacular, But then there could also be a backlash to that where people just want, smaller scale things. And I certainly, the bigger the galleries, the museums get, the more interested I am in alternative projects and small spaces and artist-run things and so on. So I think actually that's what's going to happen. I mean, the state has got the tanks, for example, and the idea is that this is a space where you can actually do performance and you can do, it's almost like the alternative is also being appropriated by the bigger spaces. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But then I think that, there could be some kind of backlash against all of that because, it's capital intensive, you have to create, the running cost of those places must be absolutely phenomenal. It must go into millions. But then artists sometimes just don't want any of that. They just want to do things outside of those mega institutions.
Do you think the space sometimes affects the kind of art that's being made?
Evidently, and that we've got the kind of, super mega galleries and the mega artists who kind of have incredible productions that cost over £10 million to make. But then it's not always the best art. That's, it's not about how much money or how big the art is. And I think that there probably will be some kind of adjustments because it's not sustainable. That level of capital into work is not sustainable. You can't sustain that year after year. So there might be, an artist might actually rebel altogether and start doing things virtually or on their computer or just outside or art without walls,
But there's also the coming together of art and architecture as a catalyst. Guggenheim, for instance, the Bilbao type of project where politicians and economists see art as a potential catalyst and for regeneration, for bringing tourism.
That is partially what you are doing.
But at a very small and controlled level. But and that's become commercialized. There's sort of the Bilbao effect has become a commercial process almost. But if you look at Shoreditch, for instance, and you look at how Shoreditch has grown over the years from places which were squats, where unlettable spaces, where the artists moved in, and then the hipsters moved in, and then commercial guys moved in after them, and then it became unaffordable. So then, the wagon goes off somewhere else, and it's almost like, we're doing this in Lagos, but with the understanding of how it can regenerate and how it can bring success to areas which are, if you look at some of these pictures, you can see that that's quite an arid landscape. And culturally, I think that seems to me like an arid landscape. And it's almost like bringing culture, injecting culture into something.
Yeah, but Lagos actually is culturally very exciting.
But I'm talking about your neighbours in Lekki. The guys who live in these kinds of expensive mansions don't seem to me to be like artists and... No,
but I think that... I see what you're saying, but I think that they may not, but their children are. I think just because of social media, I think the world is just sort of opened up in the most kind of incredible way, and I think the last generation will kind of. I struggle to keep up with with the next generation. And when I was in Lagos in November, these kids are social media savvy. And I think the shape of the world is changing in the way that people in the West don't even understand. Do you see what I mean? It's like even the way that I used to perceive Nigeria is so different from what I saw there. Do you see what I mean? So.
And how are you perceived in Nigeria as somebody who's coming from a former colonial power? Because you are, in a way.
Well, I mean, I think people, again, you see, that's another thing that's different.
Are you perceived as a Nigerian?
30 years ago, people wouldn't quite know, what I was doing or whatever. Now, people know about what I did yesterday in Nigeria. Do you know what I mean? It's just different, completely different. So there's nothing, it's not strange or new or whatever. They know what's going on. So, and I think that's what the West and the rest of the world, like the old model is dead. I mean, like, we have to rewrite the script, it's just completely dead. So those kind of divides, so they're just dissolving, And I mean, the fashion, in Nigeria and the music, right? People they developed their own thing. I remember when I was young and I lived in Nigeria, you looked up to American music. That's what you wanted to listen to. Now, people create their own. They're not interested, They just mix it all. They mix all these different influences and create their own thing. And I think that's partly why I want to be there and I want to do a project there, because I see that the balance of power is shifting. And so, you either catch up or you get left behind. But basically, things are happening, the kind of level of development that's going to happen. And Lagos is building, there's a city called Eco Atlantic City, which is a whole new kind of modern city. I mean, it's a bit, it's a bit Dubai-like, but it's a bit, but you wouldn't have even thought that they would think about something like that, not even 20 years ago, and I think that's what people have to kind of get used to, this idea of the West being sort of, the best at everything. I think that's just finished. It's finished, it's over. It's people have access. Well, they have access.
Thanks for letting us know.
Yes, no, but you see, the thing is, in the past, people couldn't get hold of library books and stuff.
Yeah.
They go online.
It was the power of knowledge was elsewhere.
Yeah, Google, they go online and they learn whatever they want to learn.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's kind of exciting about
very
now.
Exciting. Any more questions for Yinka? Or Elsie, of course. Sorry, Elsie.
Don't mind me.
Well,
it's not really a question, but it's just something in relation to like these art factories you're talking about. Like it's like an industry secret. But I remember 2 years ago, one of the art factories, the one that's in East End, I can't remember the name, but it's like kind of an orange building. But that one posted ads on the AA website one time to find people to work for them. So it's interesting that like it's come around.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe architects start making art.
They needed people to draft the art and detail it, pretty much.
But I mean, my projects, I work with engineers and all kinds of
structural engineers.
Yeah, I work with structural engineers. I mean, you need skills now. So I think it's quite normal.
Yeah. And this, just to add, so this is one of the things that I'm really keen on is architects just coming away from this idea that you have to be trained just to do buildings. And I think the great thing about, especially this place, is the training to think and the training to create your own life, if you like, your own life story. So I think the potential for architects to become collaborators with artists. I mean, if you can render, if you can do CAD, if you're proficient in computer-aided design, then you're so incredibly useful to artists, because you can take that idea, that germ of an idea, and turn it into a thing, a product. In a similar way, if you think of Thomas Heatherwick's work, he's not trained as an architect, he's trained as a product designer, and he's almost gone the other way, where he makes buildings which are things. And I think that's, for me, that's the exciting direction for architects, to break out of that idea of going to an office, being employed, doing buildings. You know, you use your training as a thinker to disrupt, to come up with new models, and I think that's really, really exciting.
And that's perhaps a very good conclusion to this evening's dialogue. So everybody, thank you very much for coming, and thank you, Yinka and Elsie, very much.